There is a story told in the early texts about a monk named Malankaputta. He came to the Buddha one afternoon, restless and agitated. He had questions, many questions, about the nature of the universe, the boundaries of existence, what happens after death. He told the Buddha he could not practice until these questions were answered. He stood there waiting, his mind churning with urgency. The Buddha looked at him quietly. Then he said, "Imagine a man struck by a poisoned arrow. His friends rush him to a surgeon, but the man refuses treatment. First, he says, 'I must know who shot the arrow. What caste was he from? Was he tall or short? What kind of bow did he use? What feathers were on the arrow?' The Buddha paused. The man would die, Malankaputta, before all these questions were answered. The mind, when it is overwhelmed, does something similar. It generates questions faster than it can hold them. It opens 10 directions at once. It demands answers, certainty, resolution, and it demands them now. The body tightens. The breath shortens. And beneath it all is a kind of spinning. A feeling that if you could just figure it out, just solve the right problem, just get the answer, then you could rest. But the arrow is still there. Overwhelm is not a failure of effort. It is not laziness or weakness. It is what happens when the mind tries to hold more than it was built to carry. Like a river in flood season, the water rises faster than the banks can contain it. Thoughts pour in, tasks accumulate, worries layer over worries. And somewhere inside, a voice says, "I should be able to manage this. I should be stronger. I should know what to do." Notice that word. Should. It appears often in the overwhelmed mind. It is the sound of the mind measuring itself against an invisible standard and finding itself lacking. The early teachings do not say the mind should be calm. They say the mind can be trained. They say it can learn to observe its own weather without being swept away by it. This is different. One is a demand. The other is an invitation. Right now, wherever you are, you can feel the weight of your body, the pressure of your seat or the surface beneath you, the temperature of the air. These are not ideas. They are direct sensations. The overwhelmed mind lives almost entirely in thought, in planning, replaying, imagining, solving. But the body is always here. It does not live in the future. It does not argue with the past. It simply is. You can return to it, not as an escape, but as a place to stand. The breath moves in, the breath moves out. This is not a technique to force calm. It is simply something true. The breath continues whether you notice it or not. When you bring attention to it, you are not adding something new. You are meeting what is already happening. The chest rises. The belly softens. The air touches the edge of your nostrils. These are small things, quiet things. But they are real. The river in flood does not calm by being scolded. It calms when the rain stops, when the water finds its level again. The mind is similar. It does not need more pressure. It needs space. It needs permission to stop generating answers for a moment and simply notice what is here. The Buddha did not answer Malankyaputta's questions that day. He pointed instead to what was immediate suffering and the end of suffering, not as philosophy, but as lived experience. The restlessness in the body, the tightness in the chest, the spinning in the mind. These are not abstract problems. They are sensations, and sensations can be observed. When you observe without trying to fix, something shifts. Not always dramatically, not always right away, but the relationship changes. You are no longer inside the flood, being carried. You are standing on the bank, watching the water move. This is not detachment. It is clarity. You see the thoughts as thoughts, the sensations as sensations, the urgency as urgency, and in that seeing, there is a little more room. The overwhelmed mind believes it must solve everything now. The practice invites you to do one thing. Notice what is actually here. Not the 10 things that might happen tomorrow. Not the 20 things you think you should have done yesterday. Just this breath, this moment, this small patch of ground beneath your feet. We will walk through this together, slowly. Not to eliminate overwhelm, but to change how you meet it. Not to become someone who never struggles, but to find steadiness inside the struggle. The arrow is still there, but we can begin. When the mind feels crushed, there is usually a moment just before that crushing happens. A moment when you notice the weight beginning to gather. There are emails waiting. There are tasks listed. There are people expecting something from you. There are thoughts about what you should have done, and thoughts about what comes next. And underneath it all, a kind of low hum of dread. The natural response is to grip, to tighten, to try to hold all of it at once, to keep it all from falling, to manage the impossible pile before it collapses on you. And the tighter you grip, the more you feel slipping through your fingers anyway. This is what it feels like to cling, not in some abstract, spiritual sense, but literally. Your mind is a hand, and everything you are trying to hold on to is sand. The tighter the fist, the more slips through. There is an old teaching that says you only lose what you cling to. It is not saying that if you let go, nothing will be lost. Life will still bring loss. Circumstances will still change. Tasks will still go undone. But the particular kind of suffering that comes from trying to prevent loss, from gripping so hard that your hand cramps and aches, that suffering is optional. It comes from the clinging, not from the loss itself. When your mind is overwhelmed, the clinging has usually been happening for a while. You have been holding so many things at once that you no longer notice you are holding them. The grip has become your baseline, your normal. You might even believe that if you let go of even one thing, everything will scatter. That the only way to survive is to hold tighter. But notice what actually happens in a hand full of sand. The moment you squeeze, the edges of the grains cut into your palm. The muscles in your forearm burn. You cannot move freely. You cannot reach for anything else. You are stuck in the grip, and the sand is still falling. No amount of squeezing stops that. It only makes the holding more painful. The overwhelmed mind works the same way. You are trying to hold onto the idea that you should be able to manage everything. That if you just focus hard enough, organize better, work faster, you can keep it all from falling. You are gripping the thought that you are responsible for preventing the impossible. And while you are locked in that grip, you cannot actually think clearly about what matters. You cannot move. You cannot rest. The overwhelm does not ease. It only gets tighter. What if you opened your hand? Not all at once. Not in some grand gesture of surrender, but just slightly. Just enough to notice what you are actually holding. Right now, if you pause for a moment, there is something you are gripping. It might be a thought about something you forgot to do. It might be a worry about someone's reaction. It might be the belief that you should be further along than you are. It might be the image of all the tasks lined up, waiting. There is something in your mental fist right now. Something you are holding so tightly that it has become invisible. It is just the way things are. What if you named it? Not out loud, unless you want to, but in the quiet of your own awareness. What is the one thing right now that you are gripping most tightly? Not all the things. One thing. The thing that, if you really noticed it, you would feel the tension in your hand. You do not have to let it go. Not yet. Just notice that you are holding it. Notice the grip. Feel the way your mind is clenched around it. This noticing is different from the gripping. When you are gripping, you are fused with the thing you are holding. You cannot see it clearly because you are too busy trying to keep it from falling. But the moment you notice the grip itself, the moment you feel the tension in your hand, something shifts. You are no longer entirely fused with the thing you are holding. You have created a tiny bit of space. You are aware of both the thing and the holding. In that space, something becomes possible. Not the solution, not the answer, but the possibility of a different relationship to what you are holding. The sand does not change. Your hand does not change, but the grip does. And when the grip loosens, even slightly, the sand can move more freely through your fingers. Some of it will fall. That was always going to happen. But your hand is no longer cramping. Your arm is no longer burning. You can breathe. This is not about being irresponsible. It is not about letting everything collapse. It is about the difference between holding something and strangling it. Between managing something and torturing yourself while managing it. Right now, feel that one thing you named. Feel where your mind is gripping it. Notice the tension. And notice, too, that you are noticing. That awareness itself is not gripping. Awareness is simply here, seeing the grip, the sand, the hand, all of it, without needing to squeeze. That noticing is enough. That is where the loosening begins. When your attention scatters, it feels like standing in a storm without shelter. Your mind pulls in one direction, then another. An email waits. A worry surfaces. A sound from outside draws you. A memory of something you said yesterday rises up. Before you notice, you are no longer here. You are everywhere at once and nowhere at all. This is not a flaw in your character. This is how the untrained mind moves. It follows the brightest light, the loudest sound, the sharpest feeling. There is no ground beneath your feet because you are always reaching for the next thing. The overwhelm comes not from having too much to do, but from having no anchor. You drift, and drifting even in stillness exhausts you. The earliest Buddhist teachings offer something so simple it is easy to miss. They do not offer you a way to stop the world. They offer you a way to stand steady while it moves. The breath is always here. It does not demand your belief. It does not require you to understand anything. It asks nothing of you except that you notice it. This is not positive thinking. This is not affirmation. It is observation. Right now, at this moment, you are breathing. The breath moves in. The breath moves out. It has been doing this since you were born. It will continue whether you pay attention or not. But when you do pay attention, something shifts. The scattered energy finds a place to rest. Think of a boat anchored in a storm. The anchor does not stop the waves. The wind still moves through the rigging. The boat still rocks. But the anchor holds a single point steady. The boat does not drift away from itself. In the same way, your breath is an anchor. It does not stop your thoughts. It does not clear the overwhelm, but it gives you one place to return to, again and again, until returning becomes easier than drifting. When your mind scatters, you are usually not aware of it as it happens. You notice only the exhaustion afterward. The overwhelm feels like the problem, but the real problem is simpler. You have lost touch with what is actually happening right now. Your attention has gone somewhere else, and you have no way to call it back. The breath is your way back. It is not somewhere else. It is not in the past or the future. It is here, in your belly, in your nostrils, in the slight rise and fall of your chest. This is not metaphor. This is fact. When a wave of overwhelm passes through you, When you feel the scatter beginning, the breath is still there. It does not judge you for losing focus. It does not make you feel guilty for your mind wandering. It is neutral. It is patient. It is always available. The Theravada teachers understood this clearly. They did not teach that the breath would make you peaceful or happy. They taught that the breath was a refuge. A refuge is not a place where nothing difficult happens. A refuge is a place where you can stand and be yourself, even while difficulty moves around you. Your overwhelm is real. The demands on your attention are real. The scattered feeling is real. None of that changes. But when you have an anchor, when you have one solid point you can return to, the overwhelm no longer owns you. You are standing in it, not drowning in it. This is why the practice is so simple. There is nothing to achieve. There is nothing to fix about yourself. You are simply noticing what is already true. The breath is already moving. Your body is already here. You are simply turning your attention toward it. Let yourself feel this now. Place one hand on your belly, not to change anything, not to make the breath deeper or slower, simply to feel it. Notice the hand resting there. Feel the warmth of your palm against your body. Feel the slight rise as you breathe in. The belly expands. There is space there. Then the slow fall as you breathe out. The body settles. Let one full breath move through you this way. In, out, just one. Feel how the body knows what to do. You do not have to think about it. The breath comes. The breath goes. Now a second breath. The belly rises, you are here. Out. The belly falls, you are still here. And a third. In, out. 3 full breaths. 3 moments where your attention is not scattered across yesterday and tomorrow and the list of things undone. 3 moments where you are exactly where you are. This is your anchor, not something you have to build or earn or understand. Something you already have. Something that has been holding you steady all along, even when you were not paying attention. When you notice the scatter beginning again, when the overwhelm starts to pull you in many directions, you can return here, to the hand on the belly, to the breath moving in and out, to this moment, which is the only moment where you actually are. The anchor holds, the waves continue, and you remain. When the mind is overwhelmed, there is a particular kind of suffering that comes not just from what you are thinking or feeling, but from the certainty that it will never leave. A wave of anxiety arrives, and it feels permanent. A heaviness settles in the chest, and you believe it will always be there. A thought spirals, and you cannot imagine a time when you will not be caught in it. This is the moment when the overwhelm deepens, because it is no longer just the experience itself. It is the belief that the experience is fixed, unchanging, locked into place. This belief is so convincing that it becomes invisible. You stop noticing it as a belief at all. It becomes the background, the ground truth. Of course this will not pass. Of course this is how things are now. And in that certainty, the mind tightens. The body tightens. You brace against what you believe is permanent. But there is something worth observing here, something simple that the old Zen teachers understood. They would say that no snowflake ever falls in the wrong place, and none remains. Not one. Each snowflake is distinct, shaped by its own path through the air, landing exactly where it lands. But also, and this is the part we forget when we are overwhelmed, none of them stays. The snow melts. It transforms. It does not persist in the form it took when it fell. Your thoughts and feelings are like this. Each one arrives with its own shape, its own weight, its own texture. The anxiety has a particular flavor. The heaviness has a particular location in your body. The spiraling thought has its own momentum and pattern. They are all distinct. They are all real, but they are also all passing through. When you look at the sky and watch clouds move, you see this clearly. A cloud appears. It has edges. It has a form. You can watch it. And then, without effort, without the cloud needing to do anything special, it thins. It changes shape. It moves on. Another cloud takes its place. The sky does not stay filled with the same cloud. The sky does not work to eject the cloud. The cloud simply does not remain. This is not philosophy. This is what actually happens. And it happens with your mind in exactly the same way, though we rarely sit still long enough to notice it. The overwhelmed mind resists this. It says, yes, but this is different. This thought is too sticky. This feeling is too heavy. This pattern is too deep. This will be the exception. This will be the one thing that does not pass. And in that resistance, in that argument with what is actually occurring, the overwhelm intensifies. What happens if you stop arguing and simply watch? Not watch in a forced way. Not watch as though you are trying to make something happen, but watch the way you might watch clouds, with a kind of natural interest. A thought appears in your mind right now. You can notice it. You do not need to push it away. You do not need to grab it and examine it. Just notice that it is there. Notice its shape. Notice if it has a color or a temperature or a location. Notice how it feels in your body. And then, this is the part that requires nothing from you. Notice what happens next. Does the thought stay exactly as it was, or does something shift? Does it soften? Does it move to the background? Does another thought appear in its place? Does the feeling change texture? You do not need to make anything happen. The mind is already doing this constantly. Thoughts and sensations are already arising and passing away. The only thing you are doing is noticing it, instead of being lost in the story of permanence. There is a particular kind of relief that comes from this noticing. Not because the thought goes away faster. Not because you have learned to control your mind. But because you see, directly, that what you believed was permanent is not. You see it with your own awareness. You are not taking anyone's word for it. You are not hoping it is true. You observe it. This changes something. Not everything at once, but something shifts in the way you hold the experience. There is less clinging. There is less resistance. There is less the sense that you are trapped. So the practice, if you want to call it that, is simply this: pick one thought or sensation that is present right now. Something small is fine. A restlessness in your leg. A worry that keeps returning. A tightness in your throat. Something you can actually feel or sense, and watch it. Not with effort, just with attention. See if you can notice the moment it changes, not the moment you change it. The moment it changes on its own. The moment the cloud moves. You may notice that it happens faster than you expected. You may notice that there is space between one thought and the next. You may notice that the sensation you were certain was permanent has already shifted into something slightly different. You may notice nothing at all, and that is fine too. The noticing itself is the practice. The watching is enough. This is what the Zen teachers meant. Nothing stays. Not because things are bad, or because you should not want them to stay, but because staying is not how experience works. Every snowflake falls, none remains. When something bothers you, a word spoken in a certain tone, a message that lands wrong, a small disappointment that catches you off guard, what happens next is almost automatic. The irritation arrives, and within what feels like no time at all, you react. You speak sharply. You withdraw. You defend. You push back. And afterward, you might notice the reaction was bigger than the moment called for, but by then the words are out. The distance is there. The shape of the thing is already set. This is the rhythm most of us know well. Trigger, reaction. No space between them. It feels like they are one continuous motion, like the spark and the flame are the same event happening at the same speed. The mind that is already overwhelmed, already holding too much, already tired, already stretched, experiences this cycle as especially tight and relentless. There is nowhere to turn. There is no moment where you can step back and choose differently. But there is something worth looking at here. Between the spark and the flame, there is actually a moment. It is brief. It is easy to miss, but it is there. Think of lightning and thunder. The lightning flashes across the sky in an instant. The sound that follows seems to come immediately after, but there is a gap. If you have ever counted the seconds between the flash and the boom, you know this gap is real. You can measure it. The light travels faster than sound, so there is always a space between them. That space is not empty. It is the distance sound travels at its own speed through the air. In the same way, between the moment something irritates you and the moment you react, there is a gap. It is not empty space. It is a moment of openness. In that moment, before the reaction has fully formed, before the words have shaped themselves, before the body has locked into its familiar pattern, in that moment, something else is possible. The overwhelmed mind does not feel like it has access to this gap. Everything seems fused. The trigger and the reaction feel like a single, unbreakable event. This is partly because the overwhelmed mind is already in motion. It is already braced. It is already defending against the next thing. So when something lands, there is no stillness to receive it. There is only collision. The reaction happens so fast that the gap is invisible. But invisibility does not mean absence. The gap is still there. It is not something you have to create. You do not have to build it or earn it or practice for months before it appears. It is already part of how things work. The spark and the flame are not actually one thing. The lightning and the thunder are not simultaneous. There is always a moment between stimulus and response. What changes is your capacity to notice it. And noticing it changes everything, because once you know the gap exists, you can learn to inhabit it. This is not about controlling your reactions or becoming a better person. It is simpler than that. It is about recognizing that the tight, automatic loop you have been living in is not as inevitable as it feels. There is a crack in it. There is a place where the old pattern has not yet fully locked into place. When you are overwhelmed, your nervous system is already sensitized. Your defenses are already up. The threshold for irritation is lower. So the practice here is not about waiting for a moment of perfect calm to arrive. It is about catching the gap in the moments when you are actually irritated. When something bothers you today, and something will, there is a possibility you have not yet tried. When the irritation lands, pause for one breath, just one. Not 10 breaths. Not a meditation session. One breath. What this does is simple. It interrupts the automatic flow just enough for you to notice that there is a flow at all. The breath becomes the gap made visible. It is the space between the lightning and the thunder made tangible. You are not trying to change anything. You are not trying to become calm or wise or patient. You are just breathing, and in that breath, something shifts. The breath is always available. It does not require you to be in a special state. It does not care if your mind is chaotic or your body is tense. You breathe anyway. And in the act of breathing consciously, even for one breath, you have stepped into the gap. You have inhabited it, however briefly. This is not a technique to master. It is an observation to live with. The gap exists. You can feel it. The next time irritation arises, you will have the choice to notice whether you can fit a single breath between the spark and your response. Not because you are supposed to, not because it will make you a better meditator, but because in that one breath, you are no longer completely bound by the automatic pattern. You are touching something that was always there, the space where choice becomes possible. The overwhelmed mind can rest in this understanding. You do not have to fix everything at once. You do not have to become someone else. You only need to notice that between the moment something bothers you and the moment you react, there is a moment of openness. And in that moment, you are free. When your mind is full of noise, the first thing you notice is that rest does not feel like rest. You lie down and the thoughts keep moving. You close your eyes and the planning continues. The worry about what you did not finish sits alongside the worry about what comes next. And underneath it all is a kind of low hum, a sense that you are not quite settled, that something is still asking for your attention. This fullness is not a flaw in you. It is not something you have done wrong. The mind is doing what minds do. It gathers information. It tries to solve problems. It moves between past and future. When there is much to manage, when there is change happening around you or inside you, the mind becomes busy. This is natural, but there is a difference between a mind that is busy and a mind that cannot stop being busy even when nothing needs doing. When you cannot find rest, what you are often trying to do is empty the mind. You think that if you could just clear away the thoughts, silence would arrive, so you push against the noise, you try to make it smaller, you negotiate with it. You tell yourself that you should be able to stop thinking by now. And in doing this, you are adding another layer to the fullness. You are adding effort to the noise. There is an old Zen understanding that speaks to this directly. In stillness, the mud settles and the water clears, not because you are fighting the mud, not because you are trying to remove it, but because you stop stirring. Imagine a pond after heavy rain. The water is brown. It is churned up. Leaves and soil have been pulled into it. If you were standing at the edge of that pond with a net, trying to catch the mud and pull it out, the water would stay cloudy. Your movement would keep it moving. But if you simply sit by the pond and do nothing, something shifts. The particles that were suspended in the water begin to settle. They sink, not because they were forced down, but because that is what they do when nothing is disturbing them. And as they settle, the water above becomes clear. You can see down through it. The clarity was always there. It was just hidden by the movement. Your mind right now is like that pond after rain. The noise is the churning. The thoughts and worries and plans are the particles suspended in the water. And what you have been doing, trying to fix it, trying to make it quiet, trying to be better at resting, is like standing at the edge with a net. It keeps the water moving. This does not mean you are doing something wrong. It means you might be trying the wrong direction. When you stop stirring, something happens that you cannot force. The mud does not settle because you want it to. It settles because that is its nature. And your mind has a nature too. When it is not being pushed or pulled or managed, it naturally moves towards stillness. Not a blank stillness, not an absence, but a stillness where things can be seen clearly because nothing is forcing them to stay hidden. The overwhelmed mind is not overwhelmed because it has too many thoughts. It is overwhelmed because it is trying to be somewhere other than where it is. It is trying to be calm when it is not calm. It is trying to be empty when it is full. And that trying itself is the real noise. What if you stop trying? Not in a passive way, where you give up and feel defeated, but in a simple way, where you let things be as they are for a moment. When you sit in silence without trying to fix anything, you are not doing nothing. You are doing something very specific. You are creating the conditions where settling can happen. Just as the pond does not need to be told to clear itself, it just needs to be left alone. Your mind does not need instructions on how to be still. It needs permission to stop working for a moment. This is different from meditation, where you are watching your thoughts or counting your breath or using a technique. Those have their place. But right now, what your overwhelmed mind needs is something simpler. It needs to know that it does not have to perform. It does not have to improve. It does not have to become something other than what it is right now. When you sit in silence for 5 minutes without trying to fix or improve anything, you are not waiting for something to happen. You are letting the water settle. You might notice the thoughts are still there. They might even seem loud at first, but you are not stirring them. You are not pushing them away. You are not judging them. You are simply sitting while they settle on their own, at their own pace. The clarity comes not from effort, but from the absence of effort. From the moment when you stop trying to be somewhere else and allow yourself to be exactly where you are, the mud sinks, the water clears, and in that clearing, you taste something that rest actually feels like. Not the absence of noise, but the presence of something underneath the noise. Something that was there all along, waiting for the stirring to stop. When the day ends and you lie in bed, the mind often does not end with it. Instead, it turns back. A conversation replays. A mistake surfaces. A worry about tomorrow arrives unbidden. The day, which has already passed, seems to demand something from you still. A solution, a different choice, an explanation that will somehow change what has already occurred. And the mind, faithful to this impossible task, keeps working, keeps turning over the same moments, keeps trying to solve what cannot be solved because it no longer exists except in memory. This is the overwhelm of a mind that has not yet released the day. The Buddha spoke simply about this. Do not dwell in the past, he said. Do not dream of the future. Let this moment be enough. These are not commands meant to shame you for thinking about yesterday. They are observations about what actually causes suffering. When you live in what has already happened, you are not living anywhere real. The past is gone. The future has not arrived. What remains is only now. The breath moving, the body resting, the sounds around you. This is the only place where life actually occurs. Yet the mind resists this. It treats the past as unfinished business. It believes that if it thinks hard enough, worries enough, replays enough, it can somehow change what has already been. This is the particular exhaustion of the overwhelmed mind. It works and works on something that cannot be worked on. Watch how a tree releases its leaves in autumn. The tree does not grip the leaves. It does not strain to hold them. Instead, there is a readiness. The connection loosens. The leaf falls not because the tree has solved some problem about the leaf, but because the season has changed and the leaf's time has passed. The tree does not replay the summer, wondering if it could have grown the leaves differently. It simply releases. And in that releasing, there is no struggle. There is only the natural movement of what is no longer needed. The mind, when it is calm, works something like this, not through force, not through willpower, but through a gentle recognition that what has happened, and that holding it does not change it. Replaying the conversation does not alter what was said. Worrying about the choice does not unmake the choice. The only thing that changes is your own rest, your own capacity to be here now, where life is actually occurring. This does not mean you should never think about the past. Reflection has its place. Learning from what has happened is part of living wisely, but there is a difference between reflection and rumination. Reflection looks at something that happened, understands it, and then sets it down. Rumination picks it up again and again, hoping for a different outcome each time. Rumination is the mind caught in a loop, mistaking repetition for progress. The overwhelmed mind at night is almost always ruminating. It is not reflecting, it is circling. And the more you try to force it to stop through sheer willpower, the more it often resists. You cannot think your way out of thinking too much. You cannot force relaxation. The harder you grip, the tighter the grip becomes. So what actually loosens the grip? Not effort. Not another strategy added to the list of things you must do correctly. What loosens it is a different kind of attention, a turning toward what is actually here, rather than away from what is not. Before sleep, when the day is behind you and the mind is still replaying, there is a practice that works with this directly. It is simple enough that it does not add burden. It is concrete enough that it gives the mind something real to do instead of circling. Notice 3 things from today. Not the biggest things. Not the things you think you should notice. Simply 3 moments or details that occurred. Perhaps it was the warmth of water on your hands. Perhaps it was a word someone said. Perhaps it was the quality of light at a particular hour. Choose 3. Let them be small. Let them be ordinary. And then, as you notice each one, imagine it leaving on your exhale. Not violently. Not with the sense that you must get rid of it. Simply that as you breathe out, the moment releases. Like the leaf falling. Like the tree letting go, not because it is trying, but because the connection has naturally loosened. The first moment, breathe in, hold it gently in awareness, breathe out and release it. The second moment, the same. The third, the same. 3 small acts of letting go. Not solving, not understanding, not fixing. Simply releasing what has already passed. This is not a way to make yourself sleep. It is not a technique to force relaxation. It is a way to practice while you are still awake, the very thing the mind needs to learn. That moments can be held without being clung to. That the past can be acknowledged without being relived. That release is possible without struggle. When you practice this, something shifts, not dramatically, not all at once, but gradually. The mind begins to understand in its own way that it does not need to solve yesterday, that the day can be complete without being perfected, that there is a kind of freedom in simply letting what has happened be what it was, and returning to the only place where you are actually alive. The mind will be overwhelmed again. This is not failure. This is the nature of being alive in a world that moves quickly and asks much of us. The teachings do not promise that you will never feel scattered or pressed or pulled in too many directions. They offer something quieter. They offer a way to meet overwhelm without being carried away by it. When the pressure builds again, you will notice it sooner. You will feel the tightness in the chest before the thoughts spiral. You will catch the breath growing shallow before the mind starts listing everything that could go wrong. This noticing is not small. It is the beginning of freedom. It means you are no longer fully identified with the storm. There is a part of you that can see it forming. And when you see it, you do not have to fix it immediately. You do not have to make it go away. You can simply acknowledge that it is here. The mind is overwhelmed. The body is tense. The breath is short. These are conditions that have arisen. They are not permanent. They are not who you are. They are weather passing through. Sometimes the overwhelm will ease quickly. Sometimes it will stay for hours or days. Both are workable. The practice is not about controlling how long it lasts. The practice is about staying present with what is true, without adding more pressure on top of it, without telling yourself you should be calmer by now, without believing that something is deeply wrong with you because you feel this way. The breath is always here. It does not wait for you to be ready. It does not require you to be calm first. It continues, steady and patient, beneath all the noise. You can return to it at any moment, not to escape the overwhelm, but to anchor yourself while it moves through. One breath does not solve everything, but one breath reminds you that you are still here, that you have not been swept away completely. The body, too, is always present. The feet on the floor, the weight in the chair, the coolness of air moving past the skin. These sensations are simple and immediate. They do not argue with you. They do not tell you that you are doing it wrong. They are just here, offering themselves as a place to rest your attention when the mind has nowhere safe to land. You do not need to become someone else to work with overwhelm. You do not need to be wiser or stronger or more disciplined. You need only to turn toward what is happening with a little bit of gentleness, to see the overwhelm clearly, without making it mean something about your worth, to feel the tension in the body without tightening further against it, to let the breath move in its own rhythm without forcing it to be deeper or slower than it wants to be. This is enough. It has always been enough. The teachings are not a destination you arrive at. They are a way of walking. Some days the path is clear. Some days it is overgrown and hard to see. On those days, you walk more slowly. You feel for the ground beneath each step. You trust that the path is still there, even when you cannot see far ahead. If it helps, you can stay here a little longer. Let the next video play. Let the words continue to offer a steady rhythm, something to rest against as the mind settles. There is no rush. There is nowhere you need to be but here, or you can sit in the quiet that follows. Let the silence hold you. Let the breath move without narration. Let the body soften in its own time. Either way, you are already doing what needs to be done. You are here. You are breathing. You are aware. The overwhelm may still be present, but so are you. And that presence, that simple awareness, is the ground of all practice. It does not need to be perfect. It does not need to be peaceful. It only needs to be honest. Let the breath fill the space now. Let it move in and out without effort. Let the body rest where it is. Let the mind be exactly as it is, without needing to change it. This is the practice. This is the path. This is enough.